welcome to Orchid Time. Today I'd like to introduce my Oncidiums. We'll start with my Oncidium Twinkle. This is Oncidium Twinkle Pink Profusion. I've had this plant for almost a year. I got it in July of last year from Hauserman's. When I got it, this plant had just 4 pseudobulbs and it had not yet bloomed. You can see the largest ones that it started off with. It quickly began producing 3 flower spikes, which eventually bloomed in late November, early December. And I'll put up a picture of what that bloom looked like. As you can see, the flowers are pink, and they were very fragrant, but unfortunately they did not have the typical sweet twinkle fragrance that I've smelled from other plants. They had sort of a heavy old lady perfume aroma that I did not like at all, which was unfortunate because I'd been looking forward to it. However, they were delightful little flowers, so as long as you didn't get too close, it was a very enjoyable presentation. But if you were close, then less great. This Twinkle came to me potted in 100% sphagnum moss, but I'm not very good at things that are growing entirely in sphagnum moss, so I have since repotted it into a fine bark mix. I don't know if you can see that. I maintained a layer of sphagnum moss for the older roots that had been accustomed to being in sphagnum. I didn't want to accidentally dry them out and lose them all after the repotting. That may not have been a good move after all. As you can see from one of these new growths, there are a lot of pleated leaves on some of them because I wasn't quite sure how to judge when to water. Should I water when the sphagnum layer is dry, which it almost never is, or when the top layer is dry for the new roots? So I have switched my approach, and I'm now going by how dry the top third is, as opposed to the always wet sphagnum moss layer. I would not recommend potting it this way. If you're going to include sphagnum in a fine bark mix, for a situation like this, I would definitely spread it throughout, because it makes knowing when to water a lot easier. This plant grows on a windowsill for me. It is on a northwest windowsill, so it gets bright but mostly indirect light, particularly toward the end of the day for like a long block. It receives the ambient humidity and temperature of the room, which is about 70 degrees Fahrenheit. And the humidity can range from anything as low as 30 to about 45% during the winter and spring, which is quite low. I typically water my Oncidiums using tap water, and I feed using MSU fertilizer at the recommended concentration. However, for the Twinkle, I've been backing off on the fertilizer concentration because, as you can see, I'm getting some leaf browning on the tips of a lot of the leaves, and it happens shortly after each time I fertilize. I noticed this pretty quickly after getting the plant, and I backed off of the fertilizer concentration. Then I switched to MSU, first at a slightly weaker than recommended concentration, and then weaker and weaker and weaker than that. I'm not entirely sure what fertilizer dosage it would be comfortable with, because it seems to have leaf browning every time I fertilize, regardless of concentration, even when it is very, very weak. I've not found a solution for this yet. I know a lot of people have problems with their Twinkles with leaf browning. So if anyone has found a solution, I would love to hear it, because it is continuing. None of the new growths have browned yet, but I don't really want to risk it. I also have some, I don't know if this is going to be visible. I also have some darkening regions on a few of the pseudobulbs, and those started at the same time as the leaf browning. So I have not treated this for a fungal or bacterial infection because it appeared so quickly after fertilizing along with the leaf browning. And I know that, I don't remember which other growers on YouTube have experienced the same sort of pseudobulb browning, but a few people have, and those that have treated it for bacterial or fungal infections have not really had any progress from that. The browning remained and didn't really spread. This browning has not spread significantly, so I'm just keeping an eye on it. Since it's repotting, this plant has grown very well. You can see it has produced 3 or 4 new growths. So even though the leaves are suffering, it is still growing strongly. So I'm going to continue the care in this vein, unless someone has a really awesome suggestion for how to improve it. So this has been Oncidium Twinkle Pink Profusion. Here we have Oncidium Gower Ramsay Jungle Queen. I got this in December of last year from Hauserman's, and it was actually the free plant at my Orchid Society's holiday party, which was held at Hauserman's. This is my newest and smallest Oncidium, but it is not going to remain tiny for long because this is actually a very young version of an Oncidium that grows to be 3 feet tall. Right now, as you can see, compared to my hand, its pot is tiny. And I think it is already busting out of this tiny pot, and I can definitely see how it could reach 3 feet tall and wide within a couple of years, because it is an enthusiastic grower. I mean, look at this growth. That's enormous. So it is a couple of years away from blooming, but the flowers are expected to be yellow and like that classic Oncidium shape. This plant is potted in a fine bark mix, and I think when I repot it, I will keep it in a fine bark mix until it's like significantly bigger than this, because it seems to be doing very well in it. I grow this Oncidium on a windowsill also, but it's in a northeast windowsill and receives primarily morning light with very indirect light through the rest of the day. I also water it with tap water and feed with the recommended strength MSU fertilizer, and it seems to be really enjoying that because, as I said, it's been growing very vigorously ever since I first got it. I only repotted it about a little over 2 months ago, and it looks like it's about ready for the next repot pretty soon here. I knew that I would be repotting it again this year, given how vigorously it's growing, but I didn't expect it to be so soon. So possibly I will try to film that repotting. I'm not super confident in filming repottings, but I might give it a go just so that we can see how many roots it's produced as well, because judging by just the very outside of the pot, it's a lot. So this is Oncidium Gower Ramsay Jungle Queen. And now my favorite Oncidium, one of my favorite orchids. This is Oncidium Sharry Baby. I've had this Oncidium for a little over 2 years. I got it in 2018 from the Chicago Botanic post-Orchid Show sale. So it was one of my first non-Phalaenopsis orchids, and what a great choice for a beginner. This plant is very rewarding and very forgiving, and I'm glad it was one of my first orchids because it has just been immensely enjoyable. As you can see, it is currently in bloom. It blooms for me regularly twice a year, beginning in March in the spring, and then again in the fall around Thanksgiving. Usually it produces either one large spike, like this year, or sometimes 2, one of which may be large and the second of which may be a little bit smaller. This orchid is famous for its fragrance, and it is one of my favorite smells. Sharry baby season is my favorite time of the year because I am just obsessed with this fragrance. It's typically described as being chocolatey, but I don't find it to be particularly chocolatey. To me, it smells fruity or kind of like vanilla. Very delicious. My Sharry baby is currently potted in a coarse bark mix with sphagnum moss in it. This is the mix I had on hand when I first got it, and also later on when I repotted it a year ago. It's not the best mix for an Oncidium. When I repot it, once it's done blooming here, I will be using a finer bark mix with moss. But despite the less water retentive mix, this Sharry baby has grown absolutely wonderfully for me and blooms beautifully with large sprays of flowers, so I guess it doesn't mind. I grow it on a windowsill, a northwest windowsill, but it also gets light from the southwest window, so it does enjoy that amount of light in the wintertime and spring. Although I do provide more shade for it in the summer because it is more sensitive to direct light than some other higher light orchids maybe. It grows at the ambient room temperature and humidity, which, as I mentioned before, is about 70 degrees Fahrenheit during the winter, and pretty low humidity in the winter and spring. And I use just normal tap water to water it, and MSU fertilizer every other watering, as I do for my other Oncidiums. And unlike other Oncidiums, it does not seem to be as sensitive to leaf tip browning or burn due to fertilizer concentration. The leaf tip damage you see here is from my cats nibbling on it back when they could reach it. So I know other people have reported that their Sharry baby does have leaf tip browning, possibly from fertilizer, unclear. Mine does not, which is a relief. So as you can see, the plant is leaning a bit, and that is because when I first got it, I didn't quite understand how much light it needed and put it into a too shady location. So it started leaning, and now it doesn't have room for the new growths to grow straight. So it is... oh, it's not visible. So it is continuing to grow with a lean. And that's a bit frustrating. I'm hoping that with a larger pot and more light as the new pseudobulbs are developing, they will hopefully have room to straighten up, but it's hard to say. My Sharry baby, as I mentioned, has been very flexible and forgiving of a wide range of light conditions and watering and fertilizing situations. I don't know if that's true for all Sharry babies or if mine is just a particularly forgiving individual, but I highly recommend this to anyone who grows orchids, any beginner. It's just a fantastic plant that rewards you with amazing fragrance twice a year. I'm a big fan. So this has been Oncidium Sharry baby and my entire Oncidium collection. It is small, but they bring me a lot of joy, and I would love to have more of them if only I had the space. So you may be seeing more Oncidiums join the collection in the future, and I will attempt also to film some repottings because two of my Oncidiums, the Sharry baby and the Jungle Queen, are due for their repotting soon. If you would like to see that, or if you're interested in updates about the rest of my orchid collection, go ahead and subscribe. Give this video a like if you enjoyed it, and comment down below if you also grow these Oncidiums, and if you have any notes about leaf tip dieback, or just if you grow different Oncidiums that you would recommend. I would love to hear your input. Say hello to me on Instagram. My Instagram handle is down below, and I will see you in the next video. Thank you for watching.